to the decision to publicly go out with your results on the email? Was your decision influenced by the Attorney General's tarmac meeting with the former President Bill Clinton?
Yes, in a ultimately conclusive way. That was the thing that capped it for me, that I had to do something separately to protect the credibility of the investigation, which meant both the FBI and the Justice Department.
Were there other things that contributed to that you can describe in an open session?
There were other things that contributed to that. One significant item I can't. I know the committee's been briefed on. There's been some public accounts of it, which are nonsense, but I understand the committee's been briefed on the classified facts. Probably the only other consideration that I guess I can talk about in open setting is that at one point the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me. But that was one of the bricks in the load that led me to conclude I have to step away from the department if we're to close this case credibly.
Picking on the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, who I like very much, but her meeting with President Clinton on that airplane was the capper for me. And I then said, you know what, the department cannot by itself credibly end this.
It was enough to raise suspicion for then FBI Director James Comey, and now former Attorney General Loretta Lynch is ready to address what happened during that 2016 tarmac meeting.
Judicial Watch has been on the case from the beginning, so what does its president expect Lynch to say? Tom Fitton joins us now. And Tom, before we get into this, let's be clear. This is not under oath. This is under the auspices of NBC News and Lester Holt. So with that as the baseline, what do you expect to hear?
Well, she already said the meeting cast a cloud on the investigation, but she never recused herself from the investigation. Remember, the meeting took place just shortly before Hillary Clinton went through that ridiculous interview with the FBI where she said she couldn't remember things because she hit her head and other silly statements like that. And James Comey thought it was something that impacted the credibility of the Justice Department. So you have both Comey and Lynch agreeing that it impacted the credibility of the Justice Department. And I'm sure she's going to say it didn't impact her decision-making. But this is why you have independent investigations. We asked for an Inspector General investigation of this 2 years ago. Still no answers. Still getting cover-ups from the FBI and Justice Department on documents about this meeting. So this NBC News interview will be interesting. But I think she's positioning herself in front of the media now because she knows James Comey is coming out with this book and will be expanding on his concerns about the Justice Department credibility. It's interesting, Comey didn't have much in the way of credibility because of his politicization of the FBI, but her politicization of the FBI in terms of bending over backwards to protect Hillary Clinton was too much even for him.
Well, Tom, you just touched on it, but I want to get into it a little bit more. You mentioned the timing of this being a little bit peculiar, the fact that she's now coming out to speak about this before the release of the book. What do you make of the timing?
Well, Comey is bringing this all back up as a result of this big book he has coming out. And it also comes in the midst of questions about the way the Justice Department was handled in terms of its targeting of Donald Trump. You had Loretta Lynch telling James Comey, by all accounts, don't call the Clinton investigation an investigation, call it a matter, while at the same time Donald Trump is being targeted with Clinton DNC dossier information, it looks like. So I think Mrs. Lynch has a lot to answer for. And she's skated through with not much in the way of questions, either on the abuse of the FISA courts, the misuse of the dossier, and the general illicit targeting of not only Donald Trump, then his team, and then, of course, all the leaks that may have come out of her Justice Department and her FBI, for which she was responsible for after the election in 2017. Ms. Lynch has a lot to answer for.
And, Tom, just to review, what documents has the DOJ and FBI turned over to you regarding text messages on that meeting on the tarmac?
Well, the FBI first told us they had no documents. Then they told us, after we found out in another lawsuit, well, maybe we do have documents, and they gave us documents showing they're more concerned about leaks about the meeting than anything else. And then we find out, thanks to the Struck Page release of information, that had been obstructed by the FBI and DOJ, that they were talking about the tarmac meeting. And we said, well, what about these text messages? And they basically told us to jump in a lake. It's a modified, limited hangout when it comes to this Justice Department and this FBI about FBI DOJ corruption going back into the Obama administration. And frankly, the president is right to be upset that Justice Department and FBI are not following the rule of law on transparency with regard to congressional inquiries and the Freedom of Information Act on every scandal under the sun.
Tom Fitton, I know you've done a lot of work on this. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your time this morning.
Well, fresh new emails shed new light on that tarmac meeting between then Attorney General Loretta Lynch and former President Bill Clinton during last year's campaign when the FBI was investigating Hillary Clinton's email server. The redacted emails show the FBI, under Director James Comey, misled the American Center for Law and Justice when it said it did not have any further records about the FBI's response to that meeting, indicating apparently it was a non-issue. But the new emails show it was very much an issue. The emails show Lynch's Justice Department and the FBI were very worried. These emails between Justice and the FBI discussed talking points to deal with the fallout of that meeting, as well as deep concern about the media's coverage of Lynch's meeting with Clinton at places like ABC, CBS, Fox News, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. Moreover, there are emails showing the mainstream media downplaying the story with their bosses in emails to the Justice Department, seemingly to curry favor with the government. We have this. A Washington Post reporter emailed the Justice Department saying, quote, "I'm hoping I can put it," meaning the story, "to rest." And a New York Times reporter emailed the Department of Justice that he was being, quote, "pressed into service to cover the story." Joining me now, attorney for the American Center for Law and Justice, he's Jordan Seculo. Good to see you, Jordan.
Good to see you, Liz.
How concerning is this, these new batch of emails about the Justice Department and the FBI dealing with this controversy?
Very, because it starts with a document that we received when we filed the FOIA request. Before we had to go to court to compel these documents, we filed a FOIA request with the Department of Justice and the FBI about 2 weeks after this meeting on the tarmac. And I got in my hands right now the response from the FBI, and the FBI said, hey, we did the search. They were kind of going back and forth with us for a couple months, and we found nothing. Well, then in yesterday's document release, if you go through there, you'll see FBI officials. Not only will you see FBI officials on the emails and actually with records, but you'll actually see places in these 413 pages where it was the FBI redacting information from us. So they were very much involved. So they started the whole process off by saying there was nothing. Then they started redacting things when there was something. And this was all happening, remember, under the tenure of James Comey. Ultimately, these documents get released. And as you pointed out, Liz, not only is it troubling to see how the Department of Justice was really just concerned about how do we respond to this. This was at a time when they were worried that the media was really going to glam on. They said, oh, you know, it'll just be Fox, maybe CBS for a few lines. Because you see those Washington Post reporters and those New York Times reporters just playing a game.
Yeah, Jordan, you know, is there any indication in the documents that you've seen, these emails, that the FBI and the Justice Department knew ahead of time that Bill Clinton would meet with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac? Because it was being played like it was an accident.
Yeah, there's a question there. So you've got the Department of Justice. Their first response to some of the people was, this wasn't planned. But then there is an email within these documents that talks about their security teams. That's the headline, and we don't get the text. But the headline is their security teams coordinating. So there, at some point, and it may have been very close, Liz, I don't want to ever go too far than what the documents tell me. At some point, they were being questioned and having to figure out were the security teams of Loretta Lynch coordinating with the Secret Service protection that former President Bill Clinton receives. So that is very real. We're not done here. At the ACLJ, we're actually going to look for, because these redactions, I've got some, just to show people, what they redacted here were we have pages and pages like this and the headline is talking points for Attorney General's media availability. Why would you redact the talking points? What we figured out going through this timeline-wise, Liz, is that they redacted that because she ultimately only had to do about one press conference on this issue, and they even say it's really just Fox News and covering it, and they've handled ABC and they've handled CBS and they got Washington Post.
And remember,
and New York
James
Times.
Comey said he was concerned that he said Loretta Lynch wanted him and wanted everybody to call it a matter and not an investigation. Trying to tone it down, right? Jordan, final word.
Yeah, final word on this is that Jim Comey loved memos, and his team was involved in this. He even said under oath that this was the reason, one of the reasons why he took that bizarre action to announce the closure of the investigation on his own. I have a feeling that this is not the end of the documents, and we're going back to court to find out what the FBI may be hiding.
Okay, good to see you, Jordan. We love having you on. Come back soon.
The most problematic part of the saga is that mysterious Phoenix tarmac meeting, the one that was unannounced and undisclosed, between former President Bill Clinton and the freshly compromised Lynch. Loretta has always had a hard time believably explaining the two were in an innocuous conversation about grandkids and golf. And they were yapping for so long, one of her staff members was like, "Holy underwear, she's alone on the plane with who?" This is grade A malarkey BS. A long, innocuous conversation lasts 30 seconds. If you have an ethical bone in your body, if you care about the rule of law or even perception of impropriety, the second the husband of a person who's under a criminal investigation, which you oversee, comes within 10 feet of you, you get the hell out of there. Unless you are on the take and are making a deal to secure your place in a future administration. This is one matter for which we should see a lot more notes. And if Comey were the scribbling bugbear he claims, there should be volumes on this meeting alone. Comey and Lynch are the reasons the reputation at the FBI and DOJ are in ruins. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions and Christopher Wray have done very little to mend the tarnishing, and it seems that no one cares about right or wrong, just about book sales, having the last word, and what's in it for me.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.